Welcome to the Hudson Institute. My name is Harold Furchtgott-Roth. I'll be your moderator today. We're very honored today to have Arielle Roth, the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for NTIA, as a speaker today. It's particularly appropriate that Arielle is here at Hudson, where I'm very proud to say she began her career, and everyone who has worked with her over the years has known that her career is just going to go up and up and up, and it has. After leaving Hudson, she went on to the Federal Communications Commission to work with Commissioner Michael O'Reilly. She then went to work on Capitol Hill for several offices, most recently as the lead telecom counsel for the Senate Commerce Committee, and it was from that position that she was nominated to her current position by President Trump early in the administration. She was confirmed by the Senate, and she's doing an outstanding job at NTIA, and we're very honored and pleased to have her here at Hudson. We look forward to her remarks. After her remarks, she and I will have a fireside chat, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions.
Oh, I've got a mic, right? I don't even. It's an honor to be here at the Hudson Institute today, and even more so to be speaking at an event with my mentor, Dr. Harold Furchtgott-Roth. I began my career here as Harold's legal fellow, and his example of integrity, economic rigor, and respect for the law has shaped my approach to public service ever since. And for anyone wondering, since I get this question a lot, no, we are not related. I'm deeply grateful to President Trump and Secretary Lutnick for the opportunity to serve our country and put those principles to work as NTIA administrator. To be back at Hudson in my new capacity is a humbling full circle moment. As an alumnus of Hudson's Center for the Economics of the Internet, I learned early on that ineffective subsidies don't just preserve the status quo. They can distort markets, crowd out innovation, and ultimately leave Americans worse off. That's a lesson I carry with me every day in my work overseeing the $42.45 billion broadband grant program known as BEAD. With BEAD, we have a deep responsibility to American taxpayers, not just to spend, but to spend wisely. This administration does not want BEAD to become just another well-intentioned broadband program that falls short. Its mission is nothing less than to close the digital divide once and for all, and we'll achieve that by staying laser focused on results and avoiding the mistakes of the past. For years, BEAD was weighed down by red tape and extra legal conditions that slowed down states, deterred providers, and sidelined innovative technologies. Under the Trump administration's reforms, BEAD is finally delivering. In the benefit of the bargain round, participation from providers surged. Applications, technologies, and matching contributions, the money providers put up themselves, all increased. That means greater competition, lower costs, more skin in the game, and better results for consumers. And the results, every American connected to broadband with savings to the taxpayer of at least $18 billion and counting. As BEAD moves toward final plan approvals, delivering results means keeping defaults to an absolute minimum. A program this large and unprecedented must be managed with discipline and careful oversight. That means meticulously reviewing state proposals to ensure compliance, prevent distortionary outcomes, and protect against waste. It's why NTIA has been asking hard questions before greenlighting projects. It's why we've been strictly enforcing match requirements barring exceptional circumstances. It's also why we've been working to identify, and yes, in some cases rejecting, outlier projects with unreasonably expensive costs or questionable feasibility, insisting instead on more practical and cost-effective alternatives. And let's be clear, the benefit of the bargain is not just about saving money. It's about making sure the government doesn't distort, in other words, sabotage, the pace of technological innovation. When the government overspends or oversubsidizes a single technology, it doesn't just waste funds, it warps the progress of innovation. Excessive subsidies crowd out private investment, slow down research and development, and delay technological progress. That's counterproductive to BEAD's mission, which is to close broadband gaps, not freeze technology in place. In a field as dynamic as broadband, minimizing distortion is critical because in every case, the most significant breakthroughs in connecting rural Americans have come not from subsidies, but from technological innovation itself. Take, for example, unlicensed fixed wireless. Once viewed as an unreliable service, unlicensed fixed wireless is now using breakthrough technology that can deliver reliable, high-speed broadband even in non-line-of-sight environments. Or the evolution of LEO satellite technology that has gone from achieving speeds of 100 over 20 megabits per second to now demonstrating the capability of delivering gigabit speeds. These advancements would not have been possible if the market wasn't challenged to find alternative solutions. And the consequences go far beyond our borders. America's technology leadership depends on a competitive environment that rewards experimentation and scale. If we lock ourselves into one model and stifle the emergence of new, more flexible and cost-effective technologies, we won't just hurt rural communities, we'll undermine the very foundation of US global tech leadership at a critical moment. But protecting innovation isn't the only reason for strong oversight. It's also about preventing defaults, the Achilles heel of past broadband efforts. When a provider fails, communities are left stranded, projects stall, and taxpayer money evaporates. BEAD can't repeat those mistakes. Being good stewards of taxpayer money means holding awardees accountable and making sure that those who take taxpayer dollars will deliver on their promises. That is what will set BEAD apart and ensure that this is really the last broadband funding program. The first key ingredient is making sure the right regulatory conditions are in place for success. NTIA's benefit of the bargain reforms did exactly that, rolling back a host of unnecessary and unlawful burdens that diverted companies' resources away from actual broadband deployment. But minimizing defaults isn't just a federal responsibility. States play a decisive role in creating the conditions under which broadband providers can succeed or fail. Deploying broadband in rural America is an expensive, capital-intensive endeavor. Projects depend on regulatory stability and predictable economics. As with the previous BEAD rules, when governments add unnecessary costs, conflicting mandates, or regulatory uncertainty, they make those projects even harder to finance and sustain. Unfortunately, some states have adopted or are considering adopting laws that specifically target broadband providers with rate regulation or state-level net neutrality mandates that threaten the financial viability of BEAD-funded projects and undermine Congress's goal of connecting unserved communities. Rate regulation drives up operating costs and scares off investment, especially in high-cost areas where every dollar counts. State-level net neutrality rules, itself a form of rate regulation, create a patchwork of conflicting regulations that raise compliance costs and deter investment. These burdens don't just hurt BEAD providers, they hurt the very households BEAD is meant to connect by reducing capital available for the hardest to reach communities. In some cases, they can divert investment away from BEAD areas altogether as providers redirect resources to their lower cost, lower risk, non-BEAD markets. Consistent with the law, which explicitly prohibits regulating the rates charged for broadband service, NTIA is making clear that states cannot impose rate regulation on the BEAD program. To protect investment, we are clarifying that BEAD providers must be protected throughout their service area in a state while the provider is still within its BEAD period of performance. Specifically, any state receiving BEAD funds must exempt BEAD providers throughout their state footprint from broadband-specific economic regulations such as price regulation and net neutrality. Otherwise, state broadband laws could create perverse incentives, pressuring providers to shift resources away from BEAD commitments to subsidize operations in non-BEAD areas subject to burdensome rate rules. That would increase the likelihood of defaults and defeat the purpose of BEAD's once-in-a-generation investment. This term is essential to ensure that BEAD funds go where Congress intended, to build and operate networks in hard-to-serve areas, not to prop up regulatory experiments that drive investment away. Permitting obstacles are another major factor that will determine whether BEAD projects succeed or fail. Providers face a litany of issues, including lengthy approval times for permits, inconsistent regulations across jurisdictions, excessive fees, delays receiving approval to attach from pole owners, and extensive environmental and historic preservation reviews. And we've seen this before. In the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund program, projects stalled or collapsed when providers ran into lengthy state and local permitting delays or wait times for pole access. BEAD's success depends on speed and certainty. Every delay drives up costs, extends build timelines, and increases the risk of defaults. States and territories must do their part to cut red tape, not add to it. NTIA has taken meaningful steps at the federal level to streamline reviews. The agency's new environmental screening and permitting tracking tool for automating environmental reviews, combined with 47 categorical exclusions, is projected to allow up to 95% of BEAD projects to automatically gain NEPA approval. But federal streamlining is only half the equation. States need to match that urgency. That's why we are requiring in our award agreements firm commitments from states to expedite permitting, including commitments to streamline processing, minimize permitting-related costs, and to the extent permitted by law, follow FCC rules on pole access and conduit, including rules on one-touch, make-ready, and self-help. NTIA is also considering how states can use some of the BEAD savings, what has commonly been referred to as non-deployment money, on key outcomes like permitting reform. No final decisions have been made, but this could be a powerful way to advance BEAD's goals. The bottom line, NTIA and the states share a common objective: connecting Americans quickly, efficiently, and permanently. But achieving that goal requires removing every self-imposed barrier to investment and deployment. BEAD can only succeed if the regulatory and permitting environment allows providers to build, not battle bureaucracy. Of course, there's another key piece of the puzzle. NTIA can design effective rules and states and territories can do their part, but BEAD will still fall short unless the right providers step up. Success ultimately depends on ensuring that projects are awarded to those who can deliver on their commitments. BEAD projects are inherently risky. These are the hardest to serve areas in the country, the ones the private sector didn't reach even with earlier federal programs. But BEAD is likely to be the last major federal broadband investment, as it should be. And providers that are banking on future subsidies to stay afloat are setting themselves and their communities up to fail. If a provider expects to come back to the government for more money later, that's a flashing warning sign that they are at heightened risk of default. Moreover, it's an expectation that's harmful to the competitiveness and transparency of the BEAD provider selection process. To protect BEAD from such risks, NTIA will require states to have providers certify in writing that they will not require or take additional federal subsidies, including operational subsidies, to complete or operate their BEAD projects. Those unwilling to make that commitment will not get an award. Their proposed service areas will instead go to entities that can and will deliver. BEAD was designed to close broadband gaps once and for all, not create another cycle of dependency. Congress envisioned future-proof networks that could stand on their own, not require permanent federal subsidies or future bailouts. That vision is still achievable, but only if we hold the line now. Fortunately, the results to date are encouraging. NTIA has seen a substantial increase in skin in the game, with nearly 40% match to our federal dollars, well above the 25% statutory minimum. And in most cases, we are seeing a strong field of providers ready to take on the last broadband frontier and follow through on their word. BEAD is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finish the job on universal broadband. The foundation is strong, and the early results are promising, but the work isn't done. To make BEAD truly succeed and keep defaults to an absolute minimum, NTIA must foster an environment that enables, not discourages, investment and holds providers accountable for sustainable, deliverable builds. In the coming weeks, we will announce the approval of several state plans that incorporate these commitments. We remain on track to approve the majority of state plans and get money out the door this year. Staying focused on the principles outlined today, we are confident that BEAD will finally close broadband gaps the right way, once and for all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was an extraordinary discussion of broadband and the BEAD program. You've been You've been head of NTIA for a few months now. You having fun?
Absolutely. It's an honor, a privilege, and a deep responsibility, and what an exciting time to be leading NTIA at such a critical time for the agency.
What are some of the biggest challenges or the biggest surprises of being the head of NTIA that you'd not expected?
You know, I've worked in different branches of government. I've worked at the FCC and I've worked in Congress. You know, it's always a learning curve when you enter a new branch of the government, but I've been so pleasantly surprised to be working with NTIA's career professionals, and I've had such a great experience so far. You know, I would say it's less of a surprise and more of a really exciting, pleasant experience.
Has the shutdown affected NTIA much?
So thankfully, 60% of NTIA's operations are funded by fees or outside of the annual appropriations process. So work is, you know, continuing as usual in BEAD and in Spectrum and in our major mandates.
60%. So they're Spectrum fees that the agencies pay to NTIA?
That's right.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
How much roughly how much money do these Spectrum fees raise?
Well, they raise enough to cover the Office of Spectrum Management's operations.
And can you all raise those to pay for the rest of NTIA?
I'm not sure that's, you know, I would have to consult with my attorneys, but.
As you know, I've advocated for Spectrum fees for federal agencies for a long time, so it's good to know that they're actually, there's some, they probably need to be higher. You're discussing some of the timelines for the BEAD program, so you're hoping to get a lot of the decisions made by the end of the year. That's great. That's really good. It doesn't seem like it was really on that timeline before, so that's good news for rural America to get this money out.
Yeah, that's right. You know, the BEAD program was enacted in 2021. It's just taken so long to get things started, and it was very important to Secretary Lutnick that in addition to putting the states on a deadline for completing their benefit of the bargain round, that we put ourselves on a deadline. We're currently on a 90-day deadline from the time of submission of the final proposals to make a decision, and with the goal of getting money, but more importantly, deployment started as soon as possible.
What's your sense of timing on getting deployment? Are there timelines on that? How do you see the deployment rolling out?
Yeah, I think it depends on the state. It depends on the mix of technologies used. But we are, the overarching goal here needs to be expeditious access to broadband. Getting the money to the states is one part of that. We're also, as I mentioned, looking at how we can use our authorities to expedite deployment on the permitting side.
You discussed permitting, and this has been a problem for decades with getting telecommunications networks out. What type of conversations are you having with the states about permitting and ways that can be expedited? Yeah,
it's you know, as you said, there's steps that we've taken at the federal level through our SPAT system that I mentioned in my remarks, but a lot of the remaining challenges are at the state and local level, and so we're really trying to get the states to commit to a best efforts approach. You when it comes to state and local permitting, so that we don't delay these projects, and so that we keep our eye on expeditious deployment. We certainly don't want to see permitting delays resulting in slower than necessary access to broadband in these areas that have been waiting for so long.
I assume this is a big priority of the administration as well, and of Secretary Lutnick to get permitting reform.
Yeah, I think that there are examples across the board. Obviously, it's easier when you're in some ways dealing with a federal permitting, like with NEPA. There can be greater challenges at the state and local level, but willing to see what we can do given our authorities to advance progress in that area.
One of the big areas of responsibility for NTIA, of course, is federal spectrum, which is a major part of the big beautiful bill that Congress passed earlier this year. And I know you worked on some of the language that ultimately was included in that statute. Tell us about what NTIA is doing on federal spectrum, to the extent you can share anything.
Yeah. So as you know, we have a big mandate under OB3 to identify 500 megahertz of federal spectrum to be reallocated for commercial full power use. And we have our first deadline coming up pretty soon to identify the first tranche of 200 megahertz. That identification is going to require, some study, and it's going to require working with federal agency incumbents. Back in September at NTIA Spectrum Policy Symposium, I outlined the 3 bands that we are going to be looking at to get to 500. We're looking at 1.675 to 1.695. We're looking at 2.7 to 2.9 gigahertz. FAA and NOAA are incumbents there. We're looking at the 4 gigahertz band with 15 different incumbents, but we're having great discussions on that band, as well as the 7 gigahertz band. 7 gigahertz, we benefit from the fact that the Trump administration initiated a 10-week spectrum sprint, and so we're further along with that in our study of that band, at least as a technical matter. We also have funding already available through the Spectrum Relocation Fund process. But we're working with our federal partners. In my speech at the Spectrum Policy Symposium, I analogized the process of finding federal spectrum to getting my kids to 2 seats in my minivan. It's a process of negotiation, making sure everyone has a place, that everyone's critical missions are protected, and that their missions run smoothly. And so that's what we're doing, having really great discussions with our federal partners. I just had a great meeting with the acting CIO at DoD, Katie Arrington. We have NOAA in the building at Commerce. We are working with the Intel community, and I've really seen a sea change in the approach to making federal spectrum available. President Trump, along with the leaders of the spectrum provisions in OB3, including my former boss, Chairman Cruz, made the case that that our technology leadership and national security are 2 sides of the same coin. We must lead the world in spectrum, and that requires making our spectrum resources more efficient. And I think that's an idea that has really been embraced by our federal partners. So just working out the details.
You mentioned the 10-week sprint. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this was led by OSTP and NTIA, and it was more of a technical analysis of certain bands, and 7 gigahertz was part of it. It's helpful to have that information as part of our study. It helps us figure out where we have to fill in information we don't currently have, to have a complete picture of the band and opportunities for making spectrum available.
Remind us of the deadlines in the bill about the identification of spectrum and when that's coming up, and I gather you all are on track to meet the deadline.
Yeah, so the first deadline, the first deadline for NTIA, the FCC has to meet its own deadline with respect to its portion of the spectrum pipeline. It has to auction 100 megahertz from the upper C-band at a minimum. And then we have to identify the first 200 megahertz within 2 years of the enactment of OB3. So, that time is ticking. We have, I guess, until July 2027 to make that identification. We'd love to be done far earlier than that. Any time that we can put more spectrum into the marketplace sooner, that pays dividends for our economy and for jobs. And so it's great that Congress set these deadlines. If possible, we hope to beat them.
Great. Some of these bands have international coordination issues. World Radio Conference is going to be coming up. Tell us about World Radio Conference and NTIA's role in that. So
the next World Radio Communication Conference is coming up in 2027. But that's actually very soon. One of the things that we're focused on with our partners in the State Department and the FCC and the White House is getting our positions for WRC 27 determined early, so that we can go to our allies and rally them around our U.S. position. At the previous World Radio Communication Conference in 2023, the U.S. was uncertain, unclear about its position, and that led to a situation where our adversaries were driving the agenda at WRC, not us, and we want to make sure that we don't make that mistake again at WRC 2027. So we're having conversations with State Department, FCC, other federal partners to get those positions ironed out as soon as possible, so that we can lead the world at WRC 27.
This seems to be a recurring problem. It's not just 2023, but going back decades, it always seems as if the U.S. is slow to finalize positions and get a unified position together. So I have great confidence that you and the rest of the administration will solve the problem that we haven't been able to solve in the past. A lot of the standard setting that builds off of the decisions of the World Radio Communications Conference have not necessarily gone our way in the past few years. So it's very important to get that right. And that's, I guess, where you have a lot of great expertise on the in-house staff at NTIA.
Yeah, no, and we're also showing up at standard-setting organizations like 3GPP. NTIA sent a delegation, including my deputy, Adam Cassidy. And so getting involved at the international level is really critical for advancing our domestic interests.
A lot of people don't know about the breadth of responsibilities that NTIA has. Can you just, for our audience, go over some of the things that NTIA does?
Yeah, sure. So statutorily, we are responsible for advising the president on telecommunications policy, broadband, spectrum, and internet policy. We, unlike the FCC, which is more of a regulatory agency, we're more of an advisor. At the same time, we also manage, one critical role of ours is that we manage federal spectrum, and we also represent the views of the executive branch on spectrum and on communications matters before the FCC. We also have been given a tremendous amount of authority and responsibility through all of the funding that we're managing. In addition to BEAD, there's multiple different broadband grant programs that are at home at NTIA, and so it's a critical time for the agency. We have this huge mandate on BEAD and a huge mandate on spectrum. We also play a pretty important role in internet policy. And as you said, as we discussed before, at standard-setting bodies, we're a key voice in the room on developing our positions our positions when it comes to spectrum, when it comes to communications policy, when it comes to satellite policy at the international stage.
Artificial intelligence, is that part of the NTIA responsibility?
Well, we've been tasked with several items from the AI action plan, so I would say absolutely. But even in addition to that, AI kind of permeates everything that so many agencies are doing these days, particularly NTIA. AI is projected to place incredible demands on broadband networks, so getting spectrum into the marketplace is critical to our AI leadership. It's also poised to become, AI is poised to become a critical part of the network infrastructure itself. So you can't really, there's almost no matter that NTIA is dealing with that doesn't somehow touch on AI and the importance of America's AI leadership.
NTIA had a history really in the development of the internet. It was the initial point of contact for internet domain name applications, and even just web applications used to get routed to NSF and NTIA. Tell us a bit about NTIA's role in internet governance and issues that are coming up before NTIA on that.
Yeah, it's as the advisor to the president on communications and information policy, we have work streams on, as you mentioned, ICANN. We represent the U.S. at ICANN. We're working on we have many different work streams that are that focus on all different issues that touch on internet policy, making sure that our adversaries are not in a position to undermine the openness and the free and open internet. And so these are things that we are working on across multiple work streams.
I'm going to open up to the audience in just a minute or two. I just have a couple more questions. Going back to BEAD, BEAD was set up to provide broadband service in areas that don't have any, presumably meaning not in competition with incumbent providers. How does NTIA make sure that the BEAD recipients aren't going to be competing with existing providers?
So BEAD is not supposed to be a program that duplicates existing high-speed networks. It's supposed to be, per the law, a program that addresses real broadband gaps where people lack service. So under our rules, that BEAD subsidies are not supposed to go to be overbuilding or duplicating existing networks. The previous administration, before we got here, had the states run a challenge process to ensure that the areas that would be covered by the BEAD program wouldn't be overbuilt. There had been a significant amount of time between then and the new rules that were announced in June, and so this administration allowed an opportunity for states to go in and investigate and account for locations that had since been served so that BEAD wasn't going to overbuild. Other ways that we targeted the issue of overbuilding, which diverts resources away from truly unserved and underserved areas, is that we restored the program to its true mission of technology neutrality. Under the previous rules, unlicensed fixed wireless providers were not considered to be served on a blanket basis. So we gave an opportunity to unlicensed fixed wireless providers to demonstrate to states where they served and where BEAD dollars should not go. We also took action to ensure that we weren't overbuilding through deployment to community anchor institutions. We kept to a very textual definition of eligible community anchor institution. In some cases, there were projects where a provider wanted to overbuild gigabit service, and we said, to us, that would not be a fair or lawful or efficient use of taxpayer dollars. We've also encouraged states to, in cases where they're building to anchor institutions, to include those in retail BEAD projects so that we're not subsidizing a network to unserved locations and then a separate network to anchor institutions that overlaps. And then finally, I would just say that we, at the federal government level, don't always have a ton of visibility into every single project area, and so sometimes providers will come to us and tell us, this project would overbuild my network. We had one case of a state that wanted to use BEAD dollars for competition rather than to actually address broadband access gaps, and that was not consistent with our rules. So, we encourage and we continue to encourage stakeholders on the ground to come to us. If there's an example of an overbuild, we'd like to know about that at the outset so that we can ensure that the program is truly delivering on its mission and that we're not using taxpayer dollars in a harmful and inefficient manner.
Well, it's an extraordinary rendition in depth in so many different areas that NTIA has. You've been very generous with your time, and if you will indulge us by taking some questions from the audience, this is a rare opportunity to address Secretary Roth about what's going on at NTIA, and as you can see, she's well-versed to answer just about any question that you might have. So we have a microphone, and if you will please identify yourself for the audience and for our online audience. We have an enormous online audience watching today. So who would like to ask the first question from the audience? Stunned silence. I don't believe it. I really find it very difficult to believe that no one actually has a question for Secretary Roth. I'll just have to keep asking questions. I have an unlimited number of questions if you like. But okay, here we go. Don't be shy.
Thanks so much for being here and for sharing your expertise. Mike Saperstein with the Wireless Infrastructure Association. So you were talking a lot about kind of the intersection between spectrum and AI, and NTIA has so many different responsibilities. How does the administration, how does NTIA think about the convergence between artificial intelligence and the physical infrastructure needed in the real world? And how do you see all of this playing out together, including through BEAD?
As I said, we we're very focused on ensuring that we deliver on our core missions, which are expanding broadband access to unserved communities and getting spectrum out into the marketplace. I think your question is about how we're going to use our authorities to lead in. So I think that, not to sound like a broken record, but getting spectrum out into the marketplace is going to be a key part of our AI leadership. I think making sure that we have a regulatory environment that fosters the deployment of technologies that in a manner that's not keeping us from leading the world is really important. I think some of the lessons that I mentioned in the speech about the state mandates that are undermine the deployment of technology are, whether permitting or elsewhere, are going to be really minimizing those is really important. And getting broadband out to everywhere. I think the goal of BEAD is to close the digital divide once and for all. The previous approach to the program is let's just get one technology out as far as possible. I think our approach is no. The point of BEAD is to deliver universal connectivity once and for all. And doing that is making sure that everyone in the country has access is a key part of ensuring our international global leadership, and making sure that we're taking a approach to technology that doesn't pick winners and losers, because when you do that, you ultimately harm our global technology leadership. It stunts private research and development. It stunts innovation. There's been a lot of focus on, we're trying to, NTIA has, been very focused on saving money. The bigger issue is preventing distortionary outcomes that harm our technology leadership. We don't know what the future holds. It would be hubris on the part of regulators or the government to say that we know what the future holds. The last 20 years of technology development have certainly proven otherwise. And so making sure that we have the right policies in place, both from a technology point of view and from a regulatory point of view, I think are really key to that leadership.
Next question.
Carolyn Brandon from Whitworth Analytics and Georgetown University. Thank you very much for your remarks. So this is a question I'm asking more from the perspective of industry writ large, and that is, in your role over at NTIA, is there any particular function that you see industry can play to help you and support you doing what you guys are doing across all of these different areas? Like, for example, would you like to see more research on issue 1 or 2, or is there some sort of ongoing dialogue that you or your team is having when you come up against, you don't have the facts that you might need, or you have a question that looks like it can best be answered by an expert outside the agency? So bottom line is, what more can industry do to support the agenda that you're prosecuting over at NTIA?
I think that, number one, I think coming to us and sharing information is really important. Like in the BEAD program, as I said, we have limited visibility sometimes into the conditions on the ground. And so sharing with us what you're experiencing is going to really help inform our ability to exert oversight over this program so that it can be truly successful. I think industry plays an important role, and we rely on industry in understanding where the future of wireless is going. So sharing with us, as we work to identify the first tranche of 200 megahertz of spectrum, sharing with us, opportunities and where the future of technology is going, I think is really important in helping an informed decision. And I think also just making the case for that same case that I think won the day in OB3 between the relationship between our technology leadership and our national security, continuing to make that case is really important, and it's going to set us up for success, both with respect to increasing access to spectrum in the commercial marketplace, as well as our positions internationally.
Could you follow up a little bit on that, the relationship between national security and technological leadership? There seem to be some areas where the United States may at least momentarily have an advantage. Let's say artificial intelligence, where trillions, literally trillions of dollars of planned investment in artificial intelligence by American corporations. And then other areas where we're not doing quite so well, whether that's setting technological standards and certain manufacturing capabilities. How does the administration balance those issues, and where does NTIA fit in the discussion about this balance between national security interests and technological leadership?
Yeah, I think we saw, we've seen in previous years that we know what happens when when America doesn't lead technologically, when you have an adversary controlling our networks, when you have incidents like Salt Typhoon. We want to make sure that we're in a leadership role on technology, that technology is, that we're the ones who are exporting our technology to the rest of the world. One of the ways that I think, we could, that we win the 6G, that we become the leaders on 6G is if the killer app for 6G is developed here at home rather than by our adversaries. And so that really just takes us back to the importance of making sure that we don't hamstring ourselves by not expanding opportunities for the private sector to innovate through spectrum policy, and as well as through our cementing our positions early on, and so that we can ensure that we're not allowing our adversaries to dictate the course of the next 10 years of technology.
Next question from the audience. Yes.
Hi, Nate Karen with the American Consumer Institute. I'm back to BEAD for a second. Once funding does go out and all of the states have built out their infrastructure and they've reached all the locations once and for all, do you anticipate that they'll be allowed to use those leftover savings to reach like affordability and adoption issues?
So we are currently focused on last mile deployment in the program. That was the core mission of BEAD, which was to close broadband gaps, last mile deployment once and for all. We are on a very tight schedule to approve state proposals. We anticipate that we'll be doing that that the vast majority will be approved by the end of the year. And so with respect to the BEAD savings, we're very proud that through the benefit of the bargain reforms, we're seeing a savings of at least $18 billion. Guidance will be forthcoming on those savings. I would just say that for now, our core mission and where we're focusing our time and resources is completing the core mission of the BEAD program, which is broadband deployment, closing broadband access gaps once and for all.
We have a last question for Secretary Roth. No? Oh, yes, here we go in the front.
Hi, Tom Hastings, FCC Detail to Senate Commerce. You guys were talking about WRC, and I was just kind of curious, maybe some lessons learned you were referring to in 23 and the need for the U.S. delegation to coalesce around positions and early. Do you get the sense that there's broad kind of acknowledgement of that need to kind of get around positions for the upcoming 27, particularly given that it's going to be in China?
So I would say definitely. I think it's a topic of conversation that has come up multiple times in discussions with other agencies in our discussion over the spectrum identification. Obviously, the spectrum identification is on a different timeline from our position at WRC, but CTEL, which is like the first major meeting, is in spring, and ideally we'd like to have our positions developed at least on IMT designation by then. And so I think it's an acknowledgement that other agencies have. It's something that we've been discussing at length and in detail with agencies like DoD and the intel community. And I think that I truly believe that there's been a sea change with respect to WRC, and other agencies truly understand the importance of ensuring that we figure things out early on so that we can lead.
Well, Secretary Roth has important meetings to go to. She's been incredibly generous with her time. We really have learned a lot, and we're, I think, all comforted to know that you're heading NTIA and doing such a wonderful job. Please join me in thanking Secretary Roth.